Remember Donald Trump's campaign promise to deport violent criminals? Well, here's one of his most common refrains on the campaign trail last year, in case you forgot.
With your vote, I will seal the border. I will stop the invasion. I will end the carnage, bloodshed, and killing. And we will crush the human traffickers. You know, they traffic in women, mostly in women. We will vanquish the child smugglers, and we will liberate this nation from Crooked Joe and his migrant armies of dangerous criminals once and for all.
The only problem is the majority of people being held in ICE detention centers are actually not the violent criminals that Donald Trump promised to detain and to deport. Out of more than 65,000 migrants booked into ICE detention since October 1st, only 5% have violent convictions. Nearly 73% have no criminal record at all, and this is according to ICE data obtained by the Cato Institute. And as Ali has been documenting on this show, many of the people being caught up in this immigration crackdown have endured violent and brutal arrests, violence that no one should have to endure. Last week, video surfaced of federal agents breaking down the door of a home in New York City and holding a mother and her children, one as young as 2 years old, at gunpoint.
Stupid. Come out here.
I have my baby.
Come out here.
I have my baby. No.
Come out here. Then I'm coming to get you by your baby. So come out here.
I have my baby. I have my kids. What the f?
You hear us knocking?
Okay. 1 second. I have my baby. 1 second.
Come out here.
1 second. Don't touch me.
Now, the family's lawyers say that they are citizens, and the officers were searching for a man who did not even live there. DHS says the officers knocked on the door for 20 minutes before forcing themselves in. Now, let me reiterate, the vast majority of people who are being arrested are nonviolent and they have no criminal record. According to ICE's own data, the number of non-criminal detainees arrested by immigration agents has surged 2,000% under Trump, including a record number of children. A ProPublica investigation found that ICE has sent 600 immigrant children to detention in federal shelters this year. Now, according to ProPublica's calculations, that's more than the previous 4 years combined. What's worse is that most children detained are being separated from their parents. Now, if that feels reminiscent of the family separations of 2018, it's because it is. Even though a judge has since ruled against separating children from their parents at the border. There are no restrictions against separating immigrant families already living in the United States. So it is a new tactic with the same goal. That goal is cruelty, to deter new immigrants from coming to America and to terrify those who are already here into leaving. Jen Smyers, who was an official at the Office of Refugee Resettlement during the Biden administration, told ProPublica, quote, "I think that they're using a clearly vulnerable, clearly sympathetic population in a way that sends a powerful message to literally every other population. If they're going to go after these kids who have protections, that shows you everyone that no one is safe." Joining me now is one of the reporters behind that ProPublica reporting, Mario Ariza, and with us is Alan Orr, the longtime immigration attorney and founder of Orr Immigration Law Firm and Howard University trained lawyer, which I might add. Mario, thank you for being here. Based on your reporting, it really seems like a lot of the families being separated have had a difficult time tracking each other down. Why is that? And what happens to the children whose families don't actually find them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we managed to establish was that, on average, kids are spending 6 months in the shelters, whereas before, during the Biden administration, they were spending about a month in the shelters. And so it's pretty hard to get your kid out of the shelter once they're in there. There's increased vetting. You have to give over your DNA. You have to give all kinds of background checks. And, we actually saw a pause in kids getting out of the shelters. So it was very hard for that family that we wrote about to get their kid out of the shelter. It was even hard for them to figure out which shelter they were in. They weren't getting that kind of information.
No, wait a minute. I heard you mention that you have to give over your DNA. What's done with that, or do you know?
The DNA is used to establish whether or not the person that the kid is being given to is an actual real family member. It's part of an enhanced vetting process that the Trump administration says is necessary in order to establish that the kids aren't being given to people who shouldn't have them.
Wow. Alan, earlier this year, the Trump administration ended legal services for migrant children and has been offering cash to children who give up their cases and go home. Migrating to the U.S., we already know, is a very complex process, especially for children who are trying to navigate the system by themselves. What sort of challenges can a child who is trying to do this without proper legal support ultimately get themselves ensnared in?
Everything. There are tons of videos of children representing themselves in court and sort of failing minors being read the right from an immigration judge and being ignored. So beyond the number of experienced judges that have been removed from the bench, which hurts due process for these individuals and replaced by military judges, these children generally don't have any representation or any knowledge of what their rights are within the system. Moreover, by harming these children and creating this trauma, we are creating the next level of supervillains by sort of treating them in a different way than what is respected under the law. And legally, they should not be detained under the Flores Agreement for more than 30 to 60 days in the first place. So the concept of them being there for 6 months is just unacceptable.
So, Mario, you report that the attorneys who are representing these detained children have seen a considerable spike in the notion of like self-harm and behavioral issues that are being faced by the children who are losing hope of being released. What do you think is sort of causing that, and how are we responding, or how is the response to these young people who may be having additional issues on top of the separation?
Yeah. I'll tell you the story of the kid that we managed to really report out the most, which is the story of Carlos, right? Carlos came to the U.S. by himself, and his aunt took him in. And he was taken from his aunt's family after a stop by Florida Highway Patrol. And we didn't have any instances of Carlos self-harming, but he got really sad in that shelter, his aunt told me. He said, he stopped eating, and he would tell his aunt, hey, I don't know why I'm in here. I didn't do anything wrong. And even though his aunt was the legal custodian, right, he spent 2.5 months in that shelter, so she had a lot of trouble getting him out.
Alan, I want to talk to you about some of the recent remarks that have surfaced from the president regarding the notion of third world countries. I had a conversation previously with David Rode, and we were talking about the fact that there's not a whole lot of definition around what that means, but there still could be a significant impact to immigrants who are here lawfully in the country. Do you anticipate that following the very unfortunate shooting of the National Guardsman in Washington, D.C., and this sort of new vigor around an immigration crackdown, particularly for certain countries, that there may be an impact felt by immigrants who are here, even if they're here lawfully?
So every immigrant in this country right now is sort of on edge, and it has been that way since the administration started. This weekend sort of upstep things specifically for Afghan nationals that helped us abroad. So we had a hard, and I have clients who have green cards who have not been traveling because of the changes in this administration. And generally, just to go a little bit further, it wasn't until July, until this urgency to sort of get the numbers up for removals, that we started detaining immigrants that had children. Generally, they would have court dates. There's another way to do this in which we could give immigrants the dates to show up in court without separating the families and deport them in a whole without doing the detention and the cost. And why does that sort of DNA testing really not work is because my aunt, who's not biologically my aunt, but married to my uncle, and I share no DNA. So how are you going to know if we're family or not? This definition is sort of outsourced. And now, because it is the season in Judaism, in Christianity, and in Islam, everyone mandates sort of saving the refugee. And what is a call for America now is to stand up for these individuals, because generally they don't have lawyers and they're unseen. And 600 meets more than the number that should be detained, and probably are not being adequately detained in any of these facilities for individuals who are being imprisoned for nothing but being born.
Alan, you raise an excellent point there, and also the notion of participating in everyday activities or everyday sort of things that you have to procedurally take place in. There's also this notion that more and more people are being detained through traffic stops. Mario, what do you make of that? Like, what's that about in terms of this new sort of tactic, and how we're seeing this uptick?
So I cover Florida for ProPublica, and what we saw specifically in Florida was because the national and the state authorities are working so closely together after a series of laws were passed to enforce immigration. You have the Florida Highway Patrol leading the pack when it comes to stopping people, checking their papers, and bringing them into the deportation pipeline. And we managed to identify 24 kids that were placed in federal shelters because they were stopped by Florida Highway Patrolmen.
Wow. Mario Ariza and Alan Orr, thank you so much for very, very thought-provoking and intentional conversation. Your reporting and your work as a lawyer, Alan, so very important in this moment.